Welcome to Hollywood. This is a story I have never actually told anyone. I know because, honestly, I am still mortified by my poor decision-making skills, and I apologize for the length. When I was about 15 years old, I went on a trip to Los Angeles with my mom. As a kid, basically raised by television and cinema, I fantasized about one day visiting Hollywood. In my eyes, it looked like the most glamorous and magical place in the world. I was happy as a pig in shit when we finally got to visit. We began to take in some of the sights, exploring places like Rodeo Drive and the Sunset Strip from the top of one of those red tour buses. Earlier that day, we were given a tour of the Kodak Theater, home of the Oscars. I imagined all the icons over the years that had stood in the exact same place I was standing at that moment. Typical tourist shit, I know, but I was in heaven. Of course, that illusion did not last for long. I learned that if you come to Hollywood as a tourist and expect all flashing lights and red carpets on every street, you will be sorely disappointed. The place began to seem more seedy than enchanting. Gradually, though, I actually started to prefer this new side to the city I was experiencing. Hollywood was a crazy place of crazy people, and I loved it. The morbid side of me was fascinated by these bizarre, eccentric, yet at the same time, sad characters. I had never seen anything like it, except for in the movies, of course. Maybe this was the real Hollywood all along. Anyways, in the midst of my newfound love for this quirkier side of this place, we still had more tours to do. Next up was the Warner Brothers studio. Because we did not rent a car, most of our traveling was of the public kind, so we didn't mind. There was a bus that we could catch from Hollywood Boulevard that would take us near the studio, so we headed towards our stop to wait. Because we were in a tourist hub, obviously we were constantly bombarded with people trying to sell everything bar their left arms to tourists. We got used to it, and sometimes it even worked out. That's how we managed to get on our red bus tour. We politely declined most sellers while waiting, but just could not shake off one man who couldn't and wouldn't take no for an answer. He looked about late 50s to early 60s, wore an oversized Hawaiian shirt and a straw hat with gray, straggly hair that stopped at his shoulders. Right off the bat, I got a bad vibe. Not necessarily because of how he looked. I am quite the fan of old Tommy Bahama myself. There just seemed something off. Before we could even acknowledge him, he immediately confronted us with every single detail of what he was selling. Another LA tour. We told him no thank you, that we've already done a H-Wood tour this week, but he wouldn't walk away. Everything the last tour did, he did more of it and better. There were plenty of other tourists around he could sell to, but he would not move on. It was as if he needed us to come with him. "Where did you last tour bus take ya? Oh no, I'll show you everything for half the price. I'm telling ya, you're missing out on the deal of a lifetime. I'm the only tour in town that'll bring you right in front of the Hollywood sign so close you can touch it. You a fan of Marilyn Monroe? I'll take you to her grave. Yeah, they buried her right in front of that sign. I'll show you." Another pang of doubt. But apart from that, he honestly began to strike our interest. Yeah, he seemed a little weird, but who on that street didn't? I should stop being so judgmental, I thought. But we had already made plans, so we told them for the last time, no thank you, but we're actually on our way to the WB studios. "I'll drop you there after the tour, no charge." Okay, he wore us down. We agreed. He had us follow him down the boulevard to where his bus tour was. That's where we'd be meeting the rest of the passengers. It only took about 5 minutes, but it was the weirdest friggin' walk of my life. Don't worry guys, everyone around here knows me, okay? I'm gonna ask some of my friends on the way, okay? They'll let you know I'm a nice guy, okay? Okay. The first person he went to was a young girl behind a ticket booth. Couldn't have been older than 17 or 18. You know me, don't you? I'm just showing these ladies here that I'm alright. You know me, yes? She looked absolutely baffled and could only muster out yes? Another pang. I have no idea why we didn't just turn around there and then. His next friend was a police officer across the road. He waved to the officer, who slightly raised his palm. See, police knows me too anyways. Here's my car. Car? Our bus that we were supposed to share with fellow tourists was now a filthy rundown white saloon. What happens next still to this day makes me want to punch myself in the face for my sheer stupidity. See, me and my mom are two people who never learned how to say no. Clearly the prospect of not seeming polite was scarier than anything else to us at the time. He stared us down, waiting for us to get in the back of his car. I'm ashamed to say we did. So me and my mom sat down, looked at each other, and finally said at the same time what we had both been thinking this whole time. Nope, nope, no, nay, nah. I'd seen too many horror films to know that this is the part where the audience screams at the idiots on the screen. What the fuck are you doing? Get the fuck out of there. I normally shout that, while thinking how unrealistic it was. Nobody could possibly be that dumb. Yeah. He sat down in the driver's seat while at the same time I got the fuck out and my mom tried to think of an excuse for our sudden departure. What? No! Was all I heard as he started the friggin' car with my mom still in it. Mom, get out of the car now! Was all I remember saying, and luckily she did before he could take off with her still in the back. We quickly headed back towards our bus stop, when a few seconds later, all we heard from behind was this booming voice following us. What's your problem? Are you scared of me? Are you scared of me, ladies? Why are you leaving? I'll show you I was trustworthy. What's your deal? How about I give you a better deal? Are you scared of me? And with that was when a stroke of luck hit us. Our bus had pulled in just in time. We jumped on without looking back at him and headed to Warner Bros., trying to convince ourselves that what had just happened never did. Maybe he just really needed the sale. My mom tries to see the good in everyone. Yeah, maybe, I replied. But you do realize he never actually sold us any tickets in the first place. Also, there's no way he could bring us that close to the Hollywood sign. Also, I'm pretty sure Marilyn Monroe was never buried in front of it. But maybe that's where he was gonna bury us. I was half joking and half petrified. My mom still thought I was overreacting. No man in his right mind would carry that out in such a public place. But he wasn't really a man in his right mind, who knows? Maybe he was actually just another seemingly creepy, yet innocent guy trying to make a living, right? But I still can't help but wonder what would have happened had we stayed inside the car. We get those pangs for fear for a reason. Needless to say, I'm no longer scared for forsaking my gut at the risk of seeming impolite. Somehow spending your last days with a potential creeper seems a lot more scarier. So, Tommy Bahama tour guide, let's not meet. I know you made my life feel like a movie for a short second, but not the kind of movie I was hoping for. The Answering Machine. I grew up as an only child in a small house in the Hollywood Hills, before housing prices in the neighborhood skyrocketed. My parents were not the helicopter type, perhaps because they themselves grew up in a small, safe town in the Midwest in the 1950s and 60s. So, I spent my childhood roaming the neighborhood and the hills, playing imaginary little stories throughout my head. I had a couple of local friends over the years, but generally, there were no kids in our neighborhood. It just wasn't the place to raise children. It wasn't a great part of Hollywood at the time, and the 101 freeway was quite literally in our backyard. Most of the streets were unpaved, and there were no sidewalks. Mostly, it was populated with aging hippie types and struggling actors. So 90% of the time, I played and wandered alone. One day, my mom picked me up from school and we headed home. Once through the door, we did the usual: kick off our shoes, shouldered off school and work bags, greeted the cats, and attended to the blinking red lights on the answering machine. I think I so vividly remember our usual little routine that day, because what cut through it next was so unusual and unsettling, and rang in such sharp contrast to the comfortable little world I'd always felt safe within. I was maybe 8 or 9 years old at the time, and this was definitely a moment of innocence lost. There was only one message. A man's voice, grinning, invaded the little house. I would love so much to scare your daughter. Then he laughed, maniacal sounding and exaggerated. It would have sounded like the guffaw of a villain in some movie, but it didn't. Despite the obvious theatrics, it didn't sound that way because it was real. It was far scarier than any fiction. The laughter was loud, long, and drawn out. I didn't even hear the end of it. My mom hit stop on the player, cutting him off, but his presence still hung heavily in the air. My little world had been disturbed. I remember my mother playing it off very casually and telling me that it was nothing, and that I should not be afraid. And I recall how shocking her composure was. How was that nothing? Shouldn't I be afraid? Why wasn't she afraid? Looking back now, I realize that she was putting up a front for my benefit. Whenever I brought this up to her now as an adult, she seems to sort of vaguely remember it and goes, "Oh yeah, I know what that was. Just someone playing a prank." I'm shocked, honestly, that my parents did not go to the police with it. That's not what I would have considered a prank. To this day, I think my mom is still trying to downplay it. She grows uncomfortable when I bring it up. Anyways, after that incident, I could never really fully enjoy myself when I was out in the neighborhood by myself. I always wondered if that man was somewhere in the hills, watching. I think I was almost sold as a sex slave. When I was 18 years old, I ran away to California with my 34-year-old boyfriend. He was a real dick, but I never thought that this controlling way would be, ironically, what potentially saved me. We were homeless, living in my car in the streets of Los Angeles, and I, being naive and full of dreams, wanted to be a suicide girl. You know, for those who don't know, it's just some dumb erotic modeling agency for alternative girls. There were a lot of crazy chance things that happened while we were in LA, but this one took the cake. One day, I was sitting at a popular coffee shop in Hollywood Boulevard, and this guy in really nice clothes sat at the table next to us and began staring at me. He finally came over to our table and offered me a cigarette. I accepted. Being broke and all, this guy had a strong German accent. He told me I was very beautiful, and he told me he was a photographer. The way he kept mentioning his camera seemed very forced. He held it like a prop. He told me that he was a famous photography teacher named Face, and worked at the LA School of Art, and that he wanted to take pictures of me. He then started showing me photos on his camera of naked women in erotic poses. I was pretty uncomfortable, but he started shaming me, completely snubbing my boyfriend, by the way, saying, "You're not a prude, are you? My girls are not shy at all. Are you shy? I need a girl who acts professional." He even asked me if I shaved, and that I could shave in a public restroom if I needed to. I was convinced he was famous, and I mean, I did go to LA to be a famous model, so I would have been stupid to pass up on an opportunity like this. Well, when my boyfriend went to the bathroom, Faye started telling me, "You need to get rid of your boyfriend. I can't have him causing trouble for me. If you want to be famous, you need to drop him. We can do a photo shoot, but don't bring him." I asked for a business card, but he stalled, saying he could just call me, so I gave him my cell phone number. A couple weeks later, I was in Arcata, California, when I got a call from Face. He asked me if I dumped my boyfriend yet, and I said no. He got very angry. He told me he could fly me back to LA and I could leave without my boyfriend. I agreed. When I told my boyfriend about it, he refused to let me go. Not because he was worried about me or anything, but because he couldn't stand letting me do something that he didn't have control of. I was too scared of my boyfriend to leave without him, so I never went. I went online to look up a photographer named Face in LA. This happened about a week or two later, and not only did I find nothing about him, I also found no school with the name that he had given me. I still shudder to think what would have happened if I had gone to this guy's photo shoot alone. I might never have been seen again. I'm just waiting on a menu. A few years ago, I was living in West Hollywood and worked as an office manager, personal assistant, errand girl for a very small food service company. You could rent their facility for a party that they would cater to. They hosted cooking classes, wine tastings, all kinds of events like that. It was about a block off a main road, and it's a pretty ritzy area, so I was never concerned when I was working alone with the front gate open. I was going back and forth between the office and the kitchen one day, and as I passed by the dining room, I noticed someone sitting at the head table. Initially, I worried that I had forgotten an appointment or something, but as I walked towards the door, I could smell him and see him more clearly. This man was clearly homeless, unwashed, long dirty hair, long sleeves, and long pants and layers in the summer in LA? Odd. At the door, I stopped and said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you come in, can I help?" And as I said it, I felt my blood run cold. On the table in front of him, he was delicately playing with a butcher knife. I acted like this was all totally normal, even though I was quite sure I was about to die. He looked up and said, "I'm just waiting for a menu." I said, "No problem, let me get that for you." Calmly walked out of sight of my door and bolted to the restaurant across the street to call the cops, then my bosses. The police got there incredibly quickly and escorted the guy out. My company didn't press charges or anything. He was homeless and mentally ill, but I was never able to leave the gates open again, especially when I was there by myself. So, crazy, homeless, knife-wielding man, let's not meet. Blood-soaked bedsheets. I moved from New York to Los Angeles on a whim back in 2009. I didn't have any friends, but being an outgoing young gal, I was confident I'd meet some people and find my way in the city. My friend had interned at a popular animation company the summer prior, and gave me the name of another intern to meet with. Dave was an awesome guy, and we quickly became friends. He lived in a house in West Hollywood, rooming with 3 other kids, and their landlord lived in a sweet guest house in the back. I met the landlord a couple times passing in and out of the house, and I will admit it, he was gorgeous. He had a chiseled jaw, was totally ripped, and had these incredible blue eyes. He owned several properties and was clearly making good money from it, but there was something really off about him. The way he talked and looked at me was disjointed, and I could literally feel that he had zero emotions. Despite only meeting him in passing, he managed to find me on Facebook. I have a pretty difficult last name, so he had to have searched my name in Dave's friend list. I accepted his friend request, and he immediately began messaging me to go out for drinks. He was relentless, offering to pick me up and saying I could stay the night if I got too drunk. I felt weird. I don't have low self-esteem or anything like that. This dude was this 30-year-old supermodel type, and I was still an awkward 22-year-old trying to feel comfy in her own skin. We had absolutely nothing in common, and while I was still looking to make new friends, something in my gut told me not to hang out with this guy. Dave was moving out in the next month anyways, so I kept a distance and blocked him, knowing I would never have to talk to the landlord in person again. A couple weeks later, right before he moved, Dave and I are hammered drunk, and he mentions he hasn't seen his landlord in a while. We drunkenly agreed that we must investigate and walked to the back guest house. We came upon the landlord's outdoor seating area and deck. Draped over all the chairs and tables were bedsheets. It was really dark, but we saw that the sheets had really dark stains on them. We shined our iPhones on the sheets and saw that the stains were a deep red and brown, and there were several tears in the fabric, like it'd been ripped or stabbed. It reeked of pennies. I immediately started shaking, saying that something was really wrong. Dave was laughing awkwardly, being a typical guy. Maybe he had sex with someone on the reg. But I knew better. Seeing and smelling those sheets made me feel ill. I called a cab and told Dave I wouldn't be visiting him at home until he lived in a new house. I never heard from the landlord again on Facebook. I never knew what the fuck happened with those sheets. However, I did see the landlord once more over a year later when I was out to lunch with my boyfriend. My stomach dropped when I saw him, and almost on cue, he looked right at me from across the restaurant. He made the strangest face.